this platform and not, I don't know, regular Zoom or something, Microsoft Team or what else?
Yeah, because this whole platform has built-in ability to do these events online, but it also has all the fun channels for people to ask questions, like Boyne and Nate and John. Welcome to the stream. I'm just connecting these other platforms real quick, and then we can get going. But yeah, um, I'm I'm doing my best to get people, our community, off of Meetup because Meetup's really bad, and into our own platform. So the members, the people, the community have easier access to each other to ask questions and support each other and collaborate. And also allows us to have a better opportunity to learn how we can support everyone. So, yeah, it's just part of the bigger picture of what we're working towards. And I'm going to be rolling out an incubator program shortly, too, where we're going to be using this platform.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So I see that Boyan is with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let me just double check real quick over on LinkedIn that it's working. John, that is one of the goals later on. Kind of linked into my first startup, A Refuge, is to rebuild that, but kind of leverage that to support different communities of all types. Awesome. We're on LinkedIn. People are watching and on YouTube. So, Avi, please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. I'm considering myself as a combination of an entrepreneur, advisor, and investor. As an entrepreneur, I started 25 years ago with my first company that I brought to, I took it all the way to be public company, then sold it, and continuing with some assets of that company in the clinical diagnostic field. On the advisory level, after I sold the company in 2013-ish, I start helping other companies building their go-to-market strategy in other aspects on the clinical diagnostic world, starting from the product discovery, feasibility, product development, clinical studies, regulation, reimbursement, commercialization. And in the last 2.5 years, I also acting as a venture partner within the Cancer Fund that we have. It's a impact retail investment group. We have 10,000 members. About half of them are patients, caregivers, survivors. The other half splits between about 30% are experts from the industry, and also 20% are investors. And we're sourcing the deals together as a community. We are selecting those deals as a community. Then we're setting a due diligence team based on the experts and eventually deciding in which company to invest. So far, we invested in 7 companies in all fields of clinical diagnostic, therapeutics, patient access. So my view is being as from one side as an entrepreneur, also as an advisor and an investor, I can address companies in all the aspects associated with strategy, fundraising, impact, operations, manufacturing, all related to the world of biotechnology.
I love it. And you're another one of our really fantastic mentors who are able to speak from multiple different areas of a business operation, meaning you've been a founder, you've been a co-founder, you've been an advisor, investor, an employee. So you can really help shed light on the different, dynamics between each of these different roles that exist. And I want to first put out a call to everyone that's watching and thank you for participating and being part of this. If you are working on something and you would like insights, feedback, advice from Avi, please share. If you have specific questions, please post them in the chat. Those of you that are tuning in on our own platform, Start Motto, where we're running this event, if you'd like to come up on stage to use your microphone and camera's optional, raise your hand or let me know in chat and I'll bring you up on stage. While we wait for some questions or people to, get brave and participate, Avi, I want to start real simple, question where one of the early things that you were doing as a mentor with our community was helping people understand the opportunity for non-dilutive capital for their businesses. And related to that, this idea of founders often being in a rush to try to raise money, dilutive capital from investors or other sources. So I'd like to hear your insights, your advice for founders who are looking to raise money and how they can determine if it's too soon for them to raise that capital, if it's too much of a risk to take on dilutive funding sources, and how they might be able to assess that and make a decision for themselves.
So I will say that you have three, you have more, but the main three pathways to get money is first, and the most important is from your prospective clients. Then the non-dilutive funding, and the last is dilutive funding. The dilutive funding, the advantage of that is normally it depends on the investors, but it can come in a large chunk of money, but it's also string attached. So I will start with what something that any entrepreneur should do, which is really understand the clients. So we all have ideas, and ideas are important. Execution is more important, but more important is to understand what the client wants. So if you can start your journey by interviewing your clients and understand what they really want, and not just asking, hey, do you eat healthy food? And they will say yes, but answering to the questions like, hey, what you have for lunch yesterday and the day before, and really figure out if that is within the premise of what they are saying, you really understand what they want. And if you can deliver, in some cases, if that is a true must-have and you have the solution, they might give you an advance or prepaid kind of arrangement, and that is the best way to get your funding. That is hard, and normally most entrepreneurs are coming with their ideas and meeting the client only later. But my first advice is try to get the money from your client. If that is still impossible because it's too early, it will take too much time. This is not the type of the client. They're not risk takers. They are not appreciate you. You don't have the track record, whatever. Then there are programs in the government, like the NSF, that give money to entrepreneurs at early stage. Normally, it's two phases. Phase one is for the bringing to demonstrate the concept, and that is in the level of like 300,000. But then, if within 6 to 12 months that concept is demonstrated, you can get additional between 1 to 2 million for that phase two, and that money is non-dilutive. The string attached is limited. You need to allow the government to take control of your technology in case of emergencies, and do manufacturing in the United States if that is relevant. But other than that, there's no really any other limitation. Then on investors, the equity investors, there's all type. You have the pre-seed, seed, series A, B, C, all type different investors. The main point with all of them is associated with timing and your ability to demonstrate something which in the boxes of thinking and address the ability to deliver milestones within the time frame that you believe that are relevant, but also associate with what they see all around, and to have the meet with the investments horizon and the type of risk they are willing to take, and accordingly the amount of money they are willing to give you. So that is more tricky, and there's tons of type of investors, all kind, from angel investors, from angel groups, for retail funds, for institutional funds, like venture capitalists. So that is a webinar by itself.
Yeah, I will not disagree, but I think you did a wonderful job kind of helping people identify not only the different types of funding sources that you can be pursuing, but the stages which you would typically want to seek those out, and a lot of that has to do with creating more leverage, not only being more attractive to investors, where you're going to appeal to the investors who are bringing a lot more to the table than just capital. They're bringing different portfolio companies that can be beautiful strategic partners to open up distribution channels, marketing channels, other sorts of opportunities like that. Or the investors themselves have very strong networks and background expertise that relates to the field that your product, your service, your company is servicing, the industry, the market, and all of that. But what I love too about how you broke it down into these stages is the emphasis and priority of first making sure you're connecting with the right customers and you're able to service them and drive value for them. And then moving on to build upon that, and how there are certain clients or customers that could also be more more strategic and larger sources of capital than a simple one-time deal sort of approach. For those of you that are listening, some other concepts that play into what Avi was just talking about at the earliest stage would be designing a fake door test to test your product, just the concept, before you've built it in the market, to see if you can target the right people, appeal to them, and sway them to try giving you money. And it's like one step removed from a pre-order campaign, right, where you're pre-selling your product before it's actually out, but you're just setting up a test to see if they're willing to try to buy it. So yeah, there's a lot of documentation that we can get more into that. If people have other questions, feel free. But yeah, Avi, this is wonderful. Let me check all the chats and see what's coming in. Hi, Yardwinder. Hi, Nicholas. If you have questions, again, those of you just joining on LinkedIn, please post them. If you're working on something, share, and I'll relay that to Avi. Yeah, Nate, I see you're typing. Wonderful. John has a few different things. Avi, John's asking a little bit about coding and technologies like that. I don't know what's your background with the coding side of things?
So if you'd ask me about, say, 6 months ago, I would say, like, other than my sons are know how to code, I had like zero experience with coding. However, as part of my journey within the cancer fund, I was trying to build a new app in Python, and I have zero knowledge in Python, but I used ChatGPT to build a full app from scratch, just by putting the logics in cancer screening, diagnostics, and also build a full app in certain risk questionnaires to individuals and to identify those at high risk. So my experience with coding, again, it's very limited, but what I know from that, with the current access, definitely for Gemini and ChatGPT and all the other LLMs model, you do not need much in order to develop your own code, you just need to be meticulous and patient and ask the right questions and think of what the outcome that you'd like to have on your application.
Yeah, I think that's also like a really good piece of information for those who are not the most technical that want to maybe just build a tool for themselves or are trying to build an MVP to again test in the market and see if they can resonate with the right people. Um, yeah, like an MVP, a minimum viable product, it only needs to be good enough to achieve very specific things. One, yeah, it needs to be a viable product that people are going to get enough value from in exchange for spending money on it, right? And it needs to be a product, so it needs to be something that people do exchange capital for, money for, in order to get. And if you can, use these tools to throw something together very quickly that can allow you to test your concept with the specific people that you're after, then by all means, wonderful. Just do your best if you're using it as an actual product, not like a tool for yourself, to be transparent and let people know this is an alpha tool, it's beta, so they understand that there are likely to be limitations to how it functions, but also likely bugs. But obviously, the way that you kind of outlined the approach is really wonderful because, yes, it's so much about going slow and steady and being meticulous and making sure it's achieving the correct outcomes that you're after. Yeah. So yeah, John, with like what you're asking in regards to what's the best language to learn as quickly as possible, and those sorts of like areas of coding, it's kind of like your background's in photography, John. It's kind of like choosing the best camera for yourself, right? Kind of just futz around, get your hands on it, see how it feels, see if you enjoy like the UI, if it's intuitive to you, because different languages are going to be slightly more intuitive to an individual, like from individual to individual. So just play around. And for some of this too, when you're trying to figure out what's the easiest to learn, do a couple like Google searches and see which languages have the most documentation and tutorials and resources for you to dig into available. That's going to be helpful. We got another question from Yad
So
Winder. Oh, yeah.
just to add on that, so John, for example, when I built my app on Python, and again, 6 months ago, I was not aware that Python even exists as a coding language. It was kind of the discussion with the model to explain to me what language. I explained what I want to do, and part of that discussion is what is available, what is relevant, what will be the environment that I will put that code in. So I used Google Colab, and then the Python Anywhere to actually host that and have that app. But again, nothing on that language, on that, I didn't know anything about that. But asking the right questions and digging into the answers and reading was the way to decide on Python and then on those platform. And I have questions regarding, what will be the cost of development, what will be the hosting cost, and what will be the size of the data that I can store at that level of cost, how long I can still use it, and tons of other questions. So it started with the definitions and the descriptions of what I would like to do and be very detailed on that. And you can present that to the model, and the model will give you some answer. And you need to be very critical to those answers because sometimes they're too creative or not really addressing your point. So just repeat and clarify what you really want and what you want to achieve. And it's a long process of iterations, need a lot of patience, and it gave me tons of codes lines. I can tell you I didn't read those codes in detail even once, but I asked the question and responded to let the model do the work for me.
Avi, that's a wonderful additional context to help. Hopefully, yeah, people think about the methodology of how they're going to approach these different things, especially like coding. But that could apply to anything. I think that's really well said. Yeah, right on, John. Glad that was helpful. All right, Avi, we got a question from Yadwinder. Hey, Avi, I'm a founder of Nimble, AI agents for website and web apps testing product company from New Zealand. The question is, how long is your due diligence process for an AI startup?
So in our fields of, again, in the cancer funds, we are focused on oncology, and we have a big community of members. So our first step is to identify the experts in any particular field of investment. And that can take a couple of weeks just to find the relevant experts. I have my feeling about AI, and I know what would be the clinical utility in our case, which basically is what is the what the customer will do different having the product in hand. But in any field, you have those that are experts. We have the advantage of having so many members, so we can identify the relevant member for that due diligence. So after that stage, that process would take, and again, everyone on that fund are doing that in a kind of a volunteering way. So it's not that we can really push deadlines, but we're trying. But we're getting response or initial response, reviewing the initial material within in additional a week or two. Then we're setting the set of questions. So it's a list of questions to the company. And by the way, getting the list of questions for a potential investor is the first step that you know they have a true interest in what you're doing. And they review the material, and that raises questions. Normally it's a long list of questions associated with the technology, with the market, with the competitions, with the business model, with the potential exit, with whatever questions that might pop up in that initial discussion. And after, and so that is another a week or two. So that the starting point, as I mentioned, is already like 4 to 6 weeks. And then based on responses, normally the companies are responding relatively fast. And then try to see if there's any follow-up questions, and then try to summarize. That will take another 2 to 3, sometimes 4 weeks. So altogether, the process is something between 6 to 8 weeks in our case.
Appreciate the insight, especially explaining the process and how you are leaning on different experts in the different fields and everything. I'm curious, Avi, with AI being such a hot, technology that a lot of founders, companies are throwing onto everything. What are some common concerns or red flags that are at the top of the list when evaluating any product, any company utilizing AI that's looking for investment?
So there's the first question, and again, we are not AI experts. We reviewing companies that using AI for the development of their product. But the first thing, there's like two major level of analysis, which is what type of models they are using. There's tons of available AI model out there, and the question is whether that is an off-the-shelf model or there's any uniqueness in the model they are using. And the second is probably the most important part is the amount of data. And AI works well once you have a lot of data. So if you claiming that you have hundreds of data points and you have the best model and you're just taking off the shelf model, most likely that is a nice type of an outcome. But if you have a unique access to a data source with billions or more than that, it depends on the field. Sometimes it's millions of data points, and you not just you have those that can truly tweak the models to be specific to your goal, then the likelihood of unique outcome is much higher. So you need to demonstrate that your model is unique, or at least tweaked to be unique, and the source of data is unique and large.
Thank you for those insights. I hope Yardwinder, you're taking notes. This is great stuff. All right, we got a question from Nate Gray. All right, hello everyone. Thanks for this. It's a wonderful forum. I appreciate that. I am an entrepreneur with a gaming company that has positive revenues and strong and growing customer base. Congratulations. Any ideas on the best ways to not lose sight of innovative practices and procedures when scaling? That's a great question that applies to every single business. So, Avi, I'd love to hear your insights and answer to that.
I every industry is a bit different. And gaming, I've no clue and have no really experience in that industry. But in general, in scaling, the question is related to and you can divide it to two main things. Is first what to do with your next. Let's assume that you had another gain of like $1 million. Okay, does it really matter if that is coming from your clients, from your funding, or from whatever source? Is what are the first things that you're going to do with that $1 million? You expand your team, you expand your marketing, you do both. It's always limited. So you need to make prioritizations of how to utilize your next funding. And the second question is how fast you can do that. So let's assume that you would like to increase your team by 50%. Can you do that? There's accessibility to those type of developers. So you need to take those vectors in parallel and try to figure out what is the true rate of scaling that you can have in your industry.
I love that. So many of these answers, they're so dependent on context, and taking the time to define what those vectors are, as all of you saying, is going to help you contextualize the situation you're in and how to achieve your goals and your ambitions of where you want to go next. And a lot of this too is relying upon not thinking too far ahead, right? Because there's very specific milestones that you should be working towards and meeting before you move on to something next, right? And there's a lot of models out there that define the life cycle stages of a business, and you can find models specific to the types of businesses that are out there. Startup business, traditional business are kind of like the higher level, kind of like, discrepancies between two core models. So traditional business being more like a restaurant, a laundromat, a more typical software, company that's servicing other companies building software, right? Versus a business that is more defined today as a tech startup like Uber or Facebook or something like that, which by its very nature is going to be designed to scale more rapidly, more efficiently than a restaurant or a laundromat, right? But you may be able to find some other business model, or excuse me, life cycle stage models that are more specific to like a video game company, right? Which may be helpful because you can see how other experts from an operational standpoint, business strategy standpoint, are assigning very specific milestones to a life cycle stage. So, um, won't try to rant too much more on this, but for example, at the product market or at the validation stage of a startup, you're trying to achieve product market fit. And you want to achieve product market fit before you go to the next life cycle stage, which would be efficiency. And you want to then, during the efficiency stage, make sure that, as Avi kind of pointed out already, all your systems are understood and tested and able to handle going to scale. So if you were to bring on 100,000 new users, it won't crash your system. You're prepared for that, and it's able to scale alongside with that. And then the next stage would be scaling, which is when you dump all the capital into marketing and labor so you can manage putting all that gasoline on the fire and bring in all those users and customers and so forth. So just building on what Avi said, to help you again identify those very specific factors that are going to be relevant to you and how you scale. Try to do your best to understand what life cycle stage your business is at, what milestones you should be completing first, and what the next milestones are. Hopefully that helps too.
I would add it also depends on your industry to what rate of growth you need to be at. If that is under major competition and it's important to take a fast market share and you need to grow fast, that is you need a lot of money and that is much higher a higher risk. And then external funding, venture capitalists can be relevant. If that is in a slower pace and lower level of competition, many times it's important to go slowly. So you know exactly all of those parameters. So it all depends also on the rate of growth that you need to go with.
I appreciate the additional insights there, Avi. Very good. Nate says, thank you for that answer. You're very welcome. Even if gaming isn't your industry, parallels can be drawn between disparate industries in terms of scaling and other things too. Yes. So, yes, Avi, wonderful, wonderful answer and insights. Let me double check what's going on in the other chats. All right. So, yeah, if new people that are joining us on YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn, if you haven't heard this before, please share what you're working on, share any questions. I'll do my best to get Avi to answer them, which shouldn't be hard because I'm just going to read them to him. So don't worry about that. Okay. All right. Double checking. Yes. Little chatter. Cool. Avi. So from the venture side, we talked about where to start, customers always first, and then moving on to again finding investors or non-dilutive sources of capital like grants if possible. One of the things that has come up a lot in the community, especially with founders who are working in biotech, life sciences, and hardware as well, a lot of the concepts that they have for bringing a product to market requires a immense amount of capital in some cases. What advice can you give to a founder who has a big ambition, a big ambitious idea that may require a lot of capital? What could they be doing in order to build up access to resources, build up credibility for who they are in the field, in the market, and build up relationships with strategically aligned people who can help them open up new doors to access to capital, or partners who can kind of play a role that diminishes the need for so much capital? What sort of advice would you give to a founder who's very much in that stage of their career or their journey as an entrepreneur who doesn't yet have all that access available yet?
So yes, in the field of biotech, it's not that you normally cannot do that in your garage, and you need a lab space. But so when I started, actually, I did that in my garage, and the way to do that was to come to. During my PhD, I worked with several vendors that were suppliers to equipment to the lab at the academia. and I built relationship with those vendors. So and they knew me. So when I started, I just asked for them to rent me equipment, and I put that in my garage 25 years ago. So the concept that you cannot do that in the garage in life sciences is not completely true, but in most cases it is. But there are today several places that can rent a partial lab space or a small lab space. For example, in Thousand Oaks, where we are, Ventura Biolab, they are renting small labs starting from like 150 square feet lab, just a small desk with a hood, to a full 12,000 square feet lab that you can grow within that building. And they are not the only one, it's just a local one. So that is on that resources of having access to lab. Then is getting in joining the relevant scientific meeting and meeting with the relevant key opinion leader in the field. Sometimes if you do not have the idea, but you start to understand what is the innovations that other people are doing in the academia, and that is collide with your goals, many of those key opinion leaders associate with a certain academic centers and transfer office, and might have a certain development that already happened during the research that you can license. So not everything should start from scratch. For all of those universities, they do have transfer offices that you have access. You can look at the database and search for a certain fields and identify a certain intellectual property that you'd like to license, and you can start the discussion with the transfer office. They will connect you with the key opinion leader that or the professor or the students that develop that, and you can start ask your questions and figure out if that is relevant to start from that point. So the other element is that I mentioned the federal non-dilutive funding, but there's also local. There are state and patients associations that I was able to raise funds, for example, in one of the development from the Crohn's Colitis Foundation, which is a patient association. They have their own goals, their own means. So getting access or being acquainted with the relevant patient association is also extremely important, because at the end of the day, in the world of biotechnology and medicine, what we're developing is for the patient. So it's important to know what the patients need, wants, and their prioritization as well.
I think it's like again incredibly insightful. I love that you provide us with a number of different options in regards to yeah how to go about this. Jorge adds excellent question, Gary. You asked a question I'm currently dealing with, so hopefully Jorge that was helpful. Again, yeah, if there's any follow-up questions that you have, Jorge, if that unlocks some idea that you want to dig deeper into, feel free. Same goes for everyone else that's watching along with us. Those of you that are just joining, feel free to share what you're working on in the chat. If you have specific questions, post them. I'll relay them to Avi. Avi, I'm curious, like, I'd like to know a little bit more, like, in regards to one pathway of pursuing a career that is in the relevant field or market or industry that you want to bring a product to market to. What suggestions would you have in regards to leveraging a career path to become an entrepreneur?
Wow, that is the probably the only question that I have no idea how to answer, and the reason is that nothing in my career was in any career path. It was always going with my passion at that time in a very naive way. Today with time and experience, I'm much less naive than I was before. And in many cases, when I'm try to advise other companies, I'm saying, hey, I will give you all the experience and the limitations, but please try to remain naive, because without that passion and naive thinking that you can achieve your goal, you will never do that. So I can show you all the hurdles, and most likely, with when you hear all the hurdles, you would back off. But if not, that is the way to go.
Understandable. It's a unique, I guess, path for you, which is very, very awesome. Lucky for you, for sure. Um, but yes, I have more questions though from Jorge. Let me post them in this chat over here for people in Startmata. So Jorge says, I've been reluctant to engage in getting seed funding for my projects. I think the reason is I think I will lose control and purpose of my idea. I've heard of trying to get an SBA loan. Any thoughts on this?
So as like SBA loans are good, but like any loans, you need to pay them back. Okay, so if you have a product that is already selling and you need that money for additional features development or new product developments, and you have a source of income, that SBA loans are great. But if you're at early stage and you do not have a source of income because your clients are still not willing to pay you, or the product is still not developed yet, loss of control is not really what is important. Is more important is the ability to convince your investor that's sitting in your board of directors to believe in what you are doing. Um, I can tell you that in my case, I lost control pretty fast. It started that in 1999, and then the 2001 bust happened, and any fundraising was extremely challenged. So I lost control very fast. However, for 15 years, I was able to get whatever decision that I wanted with my board of directors by two main things. One, I was very transparent with them with all the issues that happened. And the second one was that I met with each of the board members before the board meeting and one-on-one meeting to make sure that he understands what is going on and is in full alignment with my strategy and my goal, and that will not be any surprises in the board meeting itself. And even though I lost control within the first 2 years of the company, for 15 years I was able to take any bold decisions to the strategy and my goals all the years. So I don't think that loss of control is the issue. The issue is always is to meet your milestones, to overpromise and to underpromise and overdeliver, and to be transparent with your investor and board member, and prepare them for any board meeting and any decision that you'd like to take, and get their support in advance.
I think it's very important that you highlight the fact that you would meet one on one with these different board members, or you know, people who you need to build that trust and confidence with. I think too often people forget about the individual relationships that they have with these different people, and they instead treat all of these people that are part of a group as a group only, right? And I think also it's important to understand that this is an ongoing exercise in communication with everyone. So everyone has expectations for you, your team, your product, your service, your company that are manageable and going to be met, or at least they're likely to be met. And if they aren't going to be met, you should be giving them, again, enough communication to understand that it's a possibility that they aren't met and understand why that would happen. So ideally, these different board members or investors or strategic partners, whoever it is, these specific stakeholders that you're, again, trying to rely on and you're kind of beholden to, are able to not only hear about what's going on, but gives them more context to offer advice or offer support and resources, because they're all a part of this together. They all want you to succeed. So I think that's really important. Just the one-on-one relationships and that ongoing practice of open communication. So good, Avi. What's going on in the chats? So again, we have some more people that have joined and cycled through. If you're working on something, please share. Want to know what you're working on. If you have questions for Avi, please post them. I will relay them. Everyone that's hanging out over here in Start Mata, William, Gines, I might say that wrong, Boyan, Nate, John, if you have any follow-up questions or new questions for Avi, please share. If you're working on something too, like I'd love to hear, what new things you may be working on and how Avi can, share some insights, some feedback. Let's see here. Yeah, Avi, he's like kind of building on that last, discussion. A lot of times, giving up control is inevitable, and it's just part of the process as you grow as a company and bring on different types of investors or partners. I'm curious, when do you think is the appropriate time to lose control, and what is the goal in doing that? Like, how can that be beneficial to a founder?
So normally the time you're not controlling the time. Okay, normally it happens because you need the fund and the amount of money that you'd like to raise and the terms that you get, and you find yourself with that situation. But again, I don't see that as the main thing. I think that the main thing is to be able to convince on your strategy and to have the right people besides you so you can execute. Many founders think that they can do everything by themselves, but normally there are people that have better experience in some fields, and if you can delegate that to and deliver, that is more important than actually controlling everything, whether as a management or as on your holding. So I think that eventually execution is more important than control. And what comes with execution sometimes is you need more money to just to take the right people to be beside you. And if the cost of that is control and the outcome is better execution, it worth it.
Again, always always very good insights to add. The execution too, like this is something that is important from day one, and an aspect of execution that, well, an aspect of operations that allows you to execute better that I think a lot of people should be aware of is documentation. Avi, I don't know how much this comes up in your industry, your market with the life sciences, biotech, and the
We,
digital
we are
healthcare.
we are regulated
Yeah,
business,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
So
quality control, quality assurance, quality system is starting from day one, and and in many of the companies that are coming for my advice, I'm trying to show them, okay, go through the relevant ISO certifications now, the FDA also accepting those, and see what is the type of documentations and policies and training that are required. Tons of that might be not relevant, but it will help you to understand what to expect, and it will cost you 20% more but without that, it will be impossible. Definitely in everything associated with life sciences that is heavily regulated. But in any other industry that is regulated, you'll have their own regulations, and for those that are not regulated, it will help you with the execution, with the ability to train people, with the ability to have some changes in personnels, because always you have some people that are leaving and coming, and you need to maintain the process. So working with the proper documentations, and that can be Word files and Excel files or Google's Docs and Google Sheets, or can be with software that is available today for to manage those type of documentation processes.
Yeah, yeah. I So yeah, it probably doesn't come up often because of the fact that yeah, it is a heavy regulated, or they are very heavily regulated things. But I do appreciate you connecting the dots and saying how documentation like at any stage, but especially the earliest stage, it will help in execution and training and all these different elements. And yeah, that's kind of like where I was going with this, and I wanted to remind every founder here of not just like the benefits, but the importance of not falling into the trap of typical startup mentality, where a lot of people online especially push this idea that any sort of documentation is corporate and it's anti-startup. And a lot of times this other notion of going fast and breaking things is what it means to be a startup founder. And so yeah, I think it's really great that again, you on your own kind of brought up how it is beneficial to have documentation, but it's also required in the fields that you operate in, for sure. um, Let me double check more chats and what's going on over here. uh, yeah, hang on, Avi, 1 second. Okay. All right, we're coming up on time. We got 7 minutes left. Um, Avi, do you have any insights, any tips that you would share to people that hasn't come up yet in regards to your fields that you operate in? What are some like best tips that you got? I know you have so many wonderful bits of information and expertise, and I'm just asking for the very best. So I'm gonna make your gears work here for the
So
moment.
it's kind of being with a split mind, which means that you are very, very pessimistic for the short term and very, very optimistic for the long term. So sometimes it's hard, because if you are saying, "Oh, everything can go wrong," and I'm so paranoid, and you do not see the long term, you just fail or raise your hands. But it's kind of having that two separate minded, that long term you believe in your goal, in your strategy, in your promise, but in the short term you understand or try to dig into all the details and address them in and being even paranoidic to all bad things that can happen, and address them in advance. So it's a combination of risk mitigation for the short term, but being super optimistic and dreamer on the long term.
I love that. And like something that's really important that you just said is the risk management side of things. And that too is another trap that a lot of entrepreneurs, but especially startup entrepreneurs, fall into because of the never ending torrent of just bad advice and bad actors that are out there that are preying on people's desperation or their ambitions, their eagerness to achieve their different, dreams that they have. And too many are taking on needless risk and making horrible sacrifices to their well-being, their relationships with their loved ones, family, friends, um, you know, all these different elements that makes life beautiful and worth living, but also allows someone to develop a ever expanding toolbox of different experiences and people and cultures and ways of doing things that all contribute to being more innovative and also more aware of how the market and people around you are going to likely understand something, resonate with something, think about something. And so much of that also plays into your ability to market and sell a product or service because you start to get a better understanding of how to tell your story. That's going to be, again, relatable and resonate with people from a human level. So yeah, the risk management side of things is something that is so important. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier in regards to, you know, um, managing. Sorry, I just saw a question that re-popped up in the chat for some reason. But uh, apologies, sorry, I got distracted. But yes, just all of this is about assessing the context and the vectors and the factors and contextualizing things appropriately. So it all feeds back into that. So thank you for that. Jorge says, thanks for the insights. I have to get going. Gave me plenty to think about. Awesome, Jorge. And yeah, great job, Avi, with that. Um, yeah, I think we're just about on time. So yeah, final call for questions. Anyone out there who's following along, if you have anything to, yeah.
Yeah, I will add another tip, which is ask questions. Even if you're coming for a venture meeting and you're pitching on your product, on your company, and you're getting type of response that's not respecting you, or getting response that sounds that what you're doing is wrong, it's always ask questions. Okay, what I can should I do better? And if that is not your fit with your funds, do you know anyone that might find that is relevant? And you'll be surprised sometimes from a bad meeting that the outcome was like, hey, we have zero interest of what you're doing. They will think and said, hey, you know what, this fund actually, I heard that looking for something like that, and you can find your way there, and figure out if they would like to do that. You can continue to ask the question, can you introduce me? 99% of the time it will be no, but asking the question doesn't hurt. And for the 1% that will introduce you to that new contact, that will be the benefits of that bad meeting.
Yeah, I think what matters most, again, it goes back to those relationships and building them authentically in a way that ideally endears you to a person. So they enjoy being around you, they enjoy the idea of working with you. But like Avia, you're saying, it might not be a good fit. Maybe you're too soon. Maybe you don't fit the investment thesis for the investor that you're reaching out to. It could be a number of different things. But if the relationship is authentic and it's good, they'll want to see you succeed. They'll want to play a role in helping you. It makes them feel empowered to know that they're able to impart this, ability to help you learn and grow and move forward towards, your own dreams. It's very, human kind of, interaction, and it's good. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Like Avi said, brilliant advice. Just remember to do it from a respectful place and do your best to make them feel empowered and relevant in regards to that. And another thing, Avi, that you're demonstrating that's so beautiful is to not be reactionary and be responsive. There's a lot of emotions that people feel when they're pursuing an ambition, whether it's a career or a business venture. And it's very easy to allow those emotions to be very overwhelming and kind of take over. But the more you're able to sit with those emotions and not let them control you and create space, the more likely you are, as Avi demonstrated, to evaluate where the benefits are, even from something that didn't go well, from a meeting that failed, right? So I think that's such good advice, and I really appreciate that. And so much of what you've shared today, Avi, it's been very, very helpful. Um, Yeah, so I think that's a beautiful note to end on, Avi. Thank you so much for this. Everyone that joined in, John, Guinness, William, Nate, Boyne, great to see you all over here on Startmata. Uh, be sure to use the forums, share what you got going on in the promotion, or ask some questions. I'll direct some mentors to help answer those. And yeah, everyone that joined over on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, thank you again for being a part of this. And Jorge, Yad, Yadwinder, Frank, yeah, thank you so much. Nicholas too. Avi, I'll see you soon. Hopefully, yeah, you'll be able to hang out with us
Yeah.
at next lunch.
Okay. And good luck for everyone.
Yeah,
Take
thank you. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Catch you next time.